Hello and welcome back to my channel. For you guys that don't know, my name is Andrea and this channel is Dessert First, where I make dessert recipes once a week, and then on that fourth week I'll throw in a savory dish just to keep us a little even there. So today I'm going to be making my famous Kringles. These are something I've been making for quite a few years, and they are a hit at the office, my husband's office, friends, family. So they're pretty easy to make. You do need to plan ahead a day. We're going to make the dough today, and then tomorrow I will show you how to put them together and bake them off. So got to think a little bit ahead for these. So, all right, let's get started. All right, so we are going to make the pastry part of the Kringle. That's what's going to take some time. So I've got 1 cup of cold butter that I have grated just to make it faster for me. You could just chop it up if you wanted to into cubes. I just find that this works a little bit faster. And then to this, I am going to add 2 cups of all-purpose flour. And I'm going to start to just kind of work that in. Just use your hands and just kind of, if you're just working it in, you can feel it between your hands. If you don't like doing it this way, you can use a pastry blender, which is just a tool. I don't know where mine is, or I would show you. It has a handle and basically looks a bit like a whisk because it has sections, but you just use it to kind of work it this way. You can also use a fork. That works great. You could, if you were just using the chunks, you could put it into your food processor and pulse it. That would also work. There's always ways around. If you don't have the right tools, there are workarounds on most things. But I just use my hands so I can tell when it's where I want it to be. So you can see it's kind of chunky looking. That's about where we want it. Just making sure that that flour is mixed up, and you can tell when I do that it really holds together. So okay, so now I'm going to add 1 cup of sour cream. So we're just going to dump that in there. And now it's going to be way too messy to use your hands, unless you just are okay with that, but I'm going to use my spoon. So just going to work it in here. Just want to make sure that the sour cream really gets worked in so that you don't have dry flour, or at least not very much. All right. We're just about there. Okay, now I'm going to get some plastic wrap to wrap this in. There we go. So we're just going to get some plastic wrap here, just a fair amount. And then we're just going to take this and dump it right on there. And if you have any that's like in the bottom that still feels a little dry, you can kind of work it in while it's on the plastic wrap. just going to fold this over, fold it over again, and then we're going to do another piece. There we go. And then my folded ends will go this way, upside down, just so it's well wrapped. You don't want the air to get to it, so. All right, there we go. Now we're going to put this in the refrigerator for the rest of the day, and then in the morning I will make these. Usually when I make these, I will make the dough the night before and then finish them off early in the morning. That way they're nice and warm and fresh for everyone to enjoy. So our dough has been in the fridge for about 24 hours now. You could even make this dough up a couple of days ahead of time and just leave it in the fridge until you're ready. I've never tried to freeze it, but I think it would probably freeze okay if you just double wrapped it and then put it like in a Ziploc bag, maybe for a week or so. I think it would be okay. Just when you pull it out, just sit it into the refrigerator to thaw out. So, but yeah, it's usually I'm making the dough and making the Kringles up the next day. So I've never had a need to freeze it, but I think it would work. So anyway, we are going to get into this so I can show you how to actually get them rolled out and put together and then baked off. Okay, so we're just going to unwrap this. Find the end of it here. There we go. All right. And then I'm going to cut this into thirds. So I'm just going to use my bench scraper. You can just use a knife if that's what you've got. So just try to get it as even as you can. It doesn't have to be precise, but you want them to all be about the same size. So now you could make smaller ones, so you could actually go through and either cut them into quarters, or you could even cut them and get 6 out of there if you wanted to, but they're going to be a lot smaller. So we're going to take just one of the third pieces here, and we're going to wrap this up. I'm just going to set this aside because it's not really super warm in my kitchen, but if your kitchen's really warm, you're going to want to just put it back in the refrigerator until you're ready. So, and then I'm going to fairly heavily flour my surface, and then I'm just going to kind of get a little coating there on it, and then just kind of work it a little bit with your hands. You're not really kneading it, you're just kind of working it together, because like this one just wanted to break in two. So I'm just kind of work it a bit. This will help because we're going to roll these out. Okay. And we're going to want to roll these in a rectangle. And just kind of move it around just so you get some flour under there so it doesn't stick. And you want to roll them out as even as you can. And sometimes they'll just be funny shaped. I'm just going to tell you that right now. It'll all work out. you don't want it super thin, but you don't want it to still be thick either. So just get it to where it's about a quarter of an inch thick. And then we're just going to roll this on our pen here, kind of like you would a pie crust. And then I've got a sheet tray, and I've already got a piece of parchment paper on there, so I'm just going to lay it on there just like so. My oven is preheated to 375 degrees, so I don't want to set it on the stove because it'll start to warm up, and then it'll be a little more difficult to work with. All right, so we're just going to do the next one. Just kind of work it out a little bit. The center one always seems to be closer in the right shape because you don't have those edges. So when you wrap your dough, if you will wrap it and then just kind of try to square it off as much as you can, then it'll be a little easier. But you don't really want to have to pick all the dough up and roll it in a ball and then start over, because then you incorporate too much flour into it and it really warms it up quite a bit. So so I've got some smaller sheet trays, so if you have a smaller one, just cut your parchment paper. If you have the sheets, you can cut them in half and they'll fit just perfectly. You could, the other sheet, you could actually try and get them to a sheet, but it's a little bit of a challenge. So with the two smaller sheet trays, I can get two in on one rack, so in the oven. And at this point, it's okay if it hangs over a little bit, because we'll work with it. It won't be by the time we put it in the oven. Okay, all right. So now we're going to fill them. And for mine, the base is always cream cheese. And it doesn't take a lot, but you're going to want your cream cheese at room temperature. So just set it out, depending on how warm your house is, you can just set it out the night before so that it's good and soft. I have forgotten before and had to try to soften it up, and it just needs to be at room temperature because it's already thick, so it's a little bit of a challenge to work with. But if it's still just a little bit cold, it's going to be really hard. And you don't want to try to soften it up like in the microwave or something, or on the stovetop, because then it tends to get a little too thin. So we're just putting kind of a coating on there, kind of through the center. And really what you're doing is just giving your filling a little bit of a base to keep the filling from just melting into the crust. So we're going to go with 3 different flavors. And the first one, we're going to use apricot. And this has actually been a very popular flavor. So I'm just using an apricot preserves. So we're just gonna put some right on top of our cream cheese. And you don't want to overfill them because it'll just kind of cook out of it. So, but just get, you know, a fair amount. I don't ever measure this, so if I were guessing, it's probably about 1.5 tablespoons to 2 tablespoons of cream cheese, and then about 1.5 tablespoons to 2 tablespoons of preserves. I have overfilled them before, so, and it tends to really just kind of liquefy and cook out. It's going to do that a little bit anyway, but the more filling you have in there, the more pronounced that is. So, all right, and then we're just going to use a paring knife, and I'm just going to start, and we're just going to kind of cut through. And just, it's okay if you get right up into where the filling is, because you kind of want your cuts, your strips here to be about the same length. And we're going to go right up in there. That was a little skinnier. The ends are always the tricky part, so we're just going to cut them like that. And then I'm going to take the end and just lay it over. And it's probably not going to look the prettiest, but it's okay. These kind of have a bit of a rustic kind of feel to them. And you're just going to bring them in, just rotating them. If they touch the other one on the other side, that's great. If they don't, it's okay. Just like so. And then this end, we're just going to go ahead and bring that in just a little bit. You're going to have quite a bit of crust on this one. But this pastry is not like your typical like pie dough. It's a lot more like an actual pastry. So, all right, so we're going to set that one aside. And at this point, it's okay to set it on my, all right. So our Kringles are done, and I've set them out. They've been cooling for a few minutes. I want to put this glaze frosting on them while they're still warm, but if I put them on too soon, then it really just kind of melts off completely. So in my bowl, I've got 2 tablespoons of room temperature butter, and you can see it's very, very soft. And then I'm just going to take, I don't have a real precise amount for this, so I'm going to take about 1/3 cup of powdered sugar. You don't even have to use a glaze if you don't want to on these, but I think it just adds a nice touch to it, just a little, because they're not very sweet, so it just adds a little bit of sweetness to it. And then we're going to add a little bit of vanilla. So probably, let's go with 1/2 teaspoon. You could also use almond flavor, depending on what flavors you had going on. Almond flavor won't always go with just anything. Vanilla will, so we'll just kind of mix that up, and then we're going to add just a tiny bit of milk. You could use almond milk, you could use soy, you could even go, this is about 1/2 tablespoon, you could go and use a little bit of heavy cream, or even 1/2 and 1/2. So I suppose you could use water as well, but I would just prefer to use something that has a little more flavor. So, okay. Now we have 3 of these, so we're going to have to make sure we have enough for all 3. So we'll get that mixed. And let's add another 1/2 tablespoon of milk. You want it thin enough that you can kind of drizzle it, but you don't want it so thin that it just immediately runs off. So just add a little bit more powdered sugar. That's probably enough. And you can put more on there if you want. So I'm just looking for a light glaze, but you can put as much on there or as little as you prefer. So, okay. So I'll show you this one as it is done. And you can see where it did kind of bubble out just a little bit of the sides there. This one is the lemon one. And for these smaller ones, I find that these kind of spatulas work great for getting them off of there. So I usually just kind of run it underneath it to make sure it's not sticking. And then usually turn it sideways like that. And then the other one, like this. That way you can lift it up nice and easy. There we go. And then if you don't want this kind of overdone edge, you can just kind of peel that off. And then we're just going to take some of our glaze. Usually I'll just kind of go, see it's already thickening up a bit. So you just kind of run it like so. And since it's still warm, it's going to kind of melt in there. Just like that. All right, so I'm just going to do the other 2 exactly the same way, and they are good to go. So I hope you've enjoyed this recipe, these delicious, wonderful Kringles. They will be a huge hit at your office party, your Christmas party, breakfast, brunch, whatever you want to make them for. So I hope you enjoy.